we may say even a Ukrainian, great friend of Ukrainian people, Kurt Nilsson and his colleagues. It's a second meeting that is dedicated to the topic of leadership, but leadership in an agile and lean way. And on the first meeting, we discussed maybe some theoretical and key concepts of this approach, but the main purpose of today's meeting is to go deep into practice and maybe try to practice some things. And everyone who was present on the previous meeting, you know that you had a very short homework. To read a document, a bird's-eye view on this methodology, and to fill in the lean canvas, but also to share your insights and questions about these ideas. Maybe you already are curious in which way I can use it in my organization or in my cluster, or if we are speaking about the Ukrainian Cluster Alliance, in my committee or resource center or working group. How can I implement these approaches? So this meeting is actually for these purposes. So feel free to ask your questions. You can raise your hand, or you can write your questions in the chat. Let's keep it pretty much interactive. But actually, we'll already have some maybe some points for interactions that we have already discussed with Kurt and with Alexander, because we already have some challenges in Ukrainian cluster movement and in the Ukrainian Cluster Alliance. So I think today it will be really interesting. Yeah. So Kurt, the floor is yours. You can start.
Right. Thanks a lot. Yeah, a pleasure again in this week of the 24th. For reminding, we've put the Ukrainian flag up on the little wall behind in my Agile dojo here, next to the little Ukrainian bird of liberty, actually talking about freedom. I mean, as you maybe remember from last time, this is the illustration on the front page of our book and being translated into Ukrainian right now. One of the ideas that came forward last week, well, the little bird on the Ukrainian version, of course, should be yellow and have a blue around it. So, but let's see how that develops. Right now, Glib, I think we've met before. Yeah, nice to see you. One of the students from CNIL, correct? Yeah. And that's what we talked about before, Vasil. Also, there is a bunch of people who from the students from CNIL this year, previous years, that perhaps can be drawn into this and help support the local chapters out in the regions that you were talking about, the local clusters. So there are people around there. Anyway, last time we collected quite a bit of questions, and I think we'll just I put them together on a page here. So why don't I just show that one, and we start doing the taking just the questions one by one and having a dialogue around them. It's not going to be a perfectly beautiful, entertaining session today. It's really just going to be work. So I hope that's okay. So anyway, I guess you see my screen, do you? Yep, that's all right.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, all right. And so from the backlog, we'll just take them from the top, and you can interrupt and you can throw in other questions, and we'll handle them as we move along. There are, from the backlog from last time, we had identified some challenges, and the challenges were the leadership in the resource centers, work groups, or committees. And Vasil mentioned this for 10 minutes ago as well. Yeah, that's a key thing. And so we're going to address that and have a proposal of how to find the right people and how to work with their commitment in a way. And of course, last time we also presented the idea of what we call circles, which is the value stream of getting stuff done, work actually accomplished. The value stream that has the resolution circles as a decision, decision structure for representative decision making. Again, we know that's freedom, and as Vasil just said, maybe the desire for freedom is pretty extreme. And we certainly appreciate that at the moment. Who wouldn't? So, but how do we decide together? Because I can't decide everything alone. And so that's the resolution circles, and separate into tactical, strategic, and operational. And I believe we can find those people. And the idea is, of course, the people who have those roles in the value stream, the strategic, the operational kind of leadership, they go up there like a parliament almost, and then they decide together for the common good. And as we saw last time also, if you want to give people responsibility and mandate, you've got to make sure that they have competence, they know where we are going, and they have character, so they can decide for the common good. And not just for themselves, as we are watching the American president do right now. And so David Marquette, I think I mentioned him. He wrote the book, Turn the Ship Around, about how he changed the leadership on this boat, on this ship, because he was trained for another one. So he was the boss, but he didn't know how it worked. So he said, we're all going to die if we let me decide here. And then he came up with that and said, we need competence, we need clarity. Obviously, he said, on a nuclear submarine, you don't want incompetent people walking around pushing buttons. That's going to go wrong. So these three things, and we have to find those people, those who want to and who volunteer. Then we provide confidence to the company and the customers of doing this. A lot of, and that's also the case here. Most companies are not really comfortable with letting people loose. Oh, what could happen? They'll go home, or they go off to the beach, or we never get any work done if we let them be free. That is very deep inside most of us, that we want to control, especially if we own things. This is my money. What do you mean? I have to decide. But anyway, again, we have to work on that. And then how do we do common projects? And that's, of course, where we get inside the circle. And we talked briefly last time about Scrum and the agile processes, how you can have processes that support iterative development, early delivery, value generation. And Tom Gilby is here, and he can give you a sermon of several hours length on that subject if need be. But that's the purpose of getting work done. So the common project, there are several agile disciplines or principles you can pull in and use. We use Scrum just as an example. It's a good way to start, but there are definitely other ways. The most important thing is to do work in iterations and get feedbacks going, so you learn all the time. Because in this complex world, we can't see very far. Yesterday, I was driving up here, and it was extremely foggy. So there's a limit to how fast you can go in the fog, because you can only see like sort of 50, 60 meters forward, and then you have to navigate, because especially if you don't know the road. And we don't know the road for our clusters or our businesses. So does that make sense as a sort of response to the challenges? Does that open up for some comments from some of you?
Yeah, it's totally understandable for clusters, because actually here in Ukraine, we're such in a situation that you even can't plan for longer. I don't know. So for Ukrainians, strategies that are longer than like 1-2 years sounds ridiculous, because you don't know what will happen next week. Yeah, so it totally makes sense. But maybe colleagues have anything to add?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with what Kurt was saying. Maybe if we can, maybe Tom, I don't know, because we have some difficulty to explain this value stream, and because we have sometimes not I'm not talking about special leadership, but even in teams, in working groups, on committee, we have manager with different experience, different level of experience or skills, and sometimes there is different understanding about value creation processes or value stream. And here we are a little bit lost. I mean, we don't have some methodology or explain because it's very based on experience. For example, I spent many years with customers in big international company, in commercial organization. So I have, let's say, it's my experience, but it's difficult to share this experience with people who, let's say, work, for example, in university or some less maybe advanced in commercial approach, some culture. So that's why we need today also to train people about value creation process, about value delivering processes, because anyway clusters should provide some services to our members, typically SMEs. And we consider such training or such communication in the future, but for the moment it's very, very vague and roughly blurred. Just a comment to what you say. Yeah.
Thank you. So going back now, about 20 years ago, I stumbled upon this whole idea of agile. I mean, I was also brought up in the traditional sense, and I was told by my auditor and my bankers and my board members, and just sort of be hard on people, tell them what to do, and then I discovered, okay, there's another way where people actually perhaps can decide something for themselves. And of course, we tried this. I've worked in that capacity as a coach and a teacher, and especially in the beginning, where there was not much common understanding. Maybe the same situation. I think we can assume that. The things that typically got things working were that we had a couple of people, and in Danish we call them ildsjæl, and that means a soul on fire. That means someone who really wants it, has a passion for it. And they were when talking about Scrum, they were the Scrum Masters. They were like the coaches for the sports team, the conductor for the orchestra who wants to play music, and they. So again, I think this is the key to getting a good start in your clusters, is to have some of those people who are not out like the Soviet commissars to tell people what to do, but instead to support people in finding their ways of doing it. But they do have principles and values, and they can tell them, well, you could fit within this or this or this, but this is how I could advise and lead by serving. And another example I gave from last time, I think, was Stanley McChrystal, retired general. I have a lot of respect for him. He also declined to participate in Trump's current administration because he said, I can't work for a guy who lies. And I think that's a good principle, by the way. But he said that when he was sent to Iraq 20 years ago, he had to change his behavior from being the chess master, moving the pieces around, to being the gardener, preparing the soil for this. That was pretty hard on me. He said, I was a 50-year-old 4-star general. I have been used all my life to give orders, and now all of a sudden I had to look at myself as the gardener. So this is what I'm thinking. The focus point here to get this started is to educate people who can go out and support this, and preferably local people. We can try and help back behind the scenes and all this kind of events, but that would be my first recommendation, would be to really focus on getting some people trained in this, and then we have to find the people, of course, who want to. Now, not everybody wants to. I told Vasil that I have prepared, actually I've collected something from what we normally use in our, let's see, in our training classes. So as an exercise, so we do that. We have done it with some of the classes at CNEO also, but So here, for example, we have a spreadsheet that has 4 tabs on it. So there's what values do we actually agree on that we should have? What are the competence or the qualities a product owner or a strategic owner have, or a scrum master or an operation owner, or a team member? And these are only examples, but what I would suggest is that the Cluster Alliance could sit down together, those of you, Alex, Vasil, whoever, and say, well, these are the values we support. And the idea of the spreadsheet, and you're welcome to have a copy of it. So okay, so you sit down and you agree on the things that are important. And then you say, how important is it? And you can either sort of put an X over it, terribly important. And in this case, it's actually negatively important, right? No, it is not okay to use power. So if you say, yeah, I do that, okay, that's a big negative. So that counts down. So you identify what you would like to have of values, and this is a sort of impact estimation where you say, well, if people have these qualities, how do I think that impact their ability? Or in this case, it's more general, it's a value. So I think one of the things to look for in creating a cluster is, do we have enough common value that can bind us together? Because maybe you don't. I mean, that's a possibility. Like, for example, we have quite a big problem in Denmark with very radical Muslims. And it's very, very hard to find enough value common ground to actually do something together. And you can find other totally different opposite value systems. But when you go out to the clusters, there has to be in the complex domain, remember that from last time, Kenevan? Over here in the complex domain, you bind people together with common values and common goals, not rules and regulations. Doesn't work. Fail. So, okay, so the values, and then maybe you say, well, this one is terribly negative. As a principle of honor, you honor your commitment. Oh yeah, that's a good thing. We really want people to say yes to that. Now, I'm not telling you this is exactly what you should do, but this is an example that I submit to you. Try and work together, and we would be happy to help you work together, but you decide. And the same thing for the product owner. Okay, should know the business domain really well. Yeah, I guess he should. I mean, that is really important. Ready to make strategic decisions alone on the spot? No, not really. That sounds too much like Putin and Trump, really. We don't want that. So that's probably a negative. And so you can go through this, and then you hide the yellow ones, and you hide the columns, and you let people ask.
Алло, слухай, Олег.
Sorry. Okay. So and then you go up and you once you have prepared them and out in the clusters, they could do the same. They could discuss what is important to us, what qualifications are important here, and then you hide
Алло.
these.
Чую, алло, чути тепер? Чую.
Oh, I don't know. So there's a voice from time to time. Anyway, so this is a tool set, just a practical, very, very practical tool set of trying to get a common understanding. Do we actually agree on what our values is? Do we agree on what this role should do and that role
Алло.
should do?
Алло,
Yeah,
Who you?
sorry, it's just a guy who is unmuting all the time. Maybe it's a bug of Zoom.
Yeah.
I'm just putting
Та мене
him
тут
on mute.
конференція.
You can move on. I'll cope.
Okay,
with him.
otherwise
Yeah.
you can give a message in Ukrainian, maybe.
Алло. Така штука. Ну, подивився, така штука.
Yeah, I'll try and continue. Okay, so just want final one on this one. You'll get the link, Vasil, so then you can take it from there and use it if you want. It's just a Google spreadsheet. There's nothing more to it. No high tech here. But on the team member, for example, if you go out in a cluster and you say, okay, now we have to actually do something. We're in agriculture, or we're in this. Then obviously the things you agree on that team members should know about is within the context of what this cluster actually do. So it can't be very general. The Scrum Master or the operations owner, the conductor of the orchestra, that is normally pretty general. This is a set of general competencies and characteristics that you normally can use across different sectors and clusters and businesses. That's pretty general. Remember, to some extent, this intersects with HR, human resource. And certainly in my view, this is what HR should be, and not some remote in an office behind a desk somewhere, a lady with a PhD but never had done any real work herself. This is a practical thing out here. Is this helpful, and does this make sense?
Yeah. Of course. This is really helpful, because actually this is one of our tasks or challenges or objectives to align the common values. We already have some list, and we have some discussions inside our community. But this one is really important. And also this assessment for these roles for guys with colored caps is also really important and really useful for us. I can suggest maybe for everyone to understand these roles, to feel it more naturally, more grounded to their everyday activities. So maybe we can discuss on what is this strategy owner and operation owner in clusters and in Ukrainian cluster alliance, because some people, for example, for companies, it's okay. So strategy owner is CEO and operations owner is COO. Yeah. So a founder and the director. But when we speak about clusters, so and especially when we speak about Ukrainian cluster alliance, sometimes it can be a bit hard to differentiate these people, because if we speak about clusters, so actually we have a cluster management organization, and we have members, and there is a common situation when we need to create some kinds of circles. In most clusters, they call it committees on working groups. We need to differentiate to together on some common topics. I don't know, it's education or some innovations in an industry and so on. So people differentiate into these working groups and in committees, and they work together. That's actually what works in cluster. And if we speak about Ukrainian Cluster Alliance, it works the same actually, but we're doing this not with the businesses, because in clusters it's businesses and universities and some R&D institutions. But if we do it in the Ukrainian Cluster Alliance, we do it the same, but with cluster managers and with some experts. Yeah. So but we can try maybe if we take a cluster, because Ukrainian Cluster Alliance is a bit complicated. If we take a cluster, how we can differentiate these roles, like strategy owner and operations owner and team members, if we go on with this structure that I like.
I would, first of all, I would say, I think, Christian, you may correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we actually developed this when we did something for Circle K a few years ago. This was where this kind of concept came to the surface. And that's also, by the way, I would always recommend that also when you create a cluster, you have something real to do. There is work that needs to be done instead of just sitting at the desk of thinking up theories. And that was how this was born also. There was a real need. There was a customer who said, what do I actually do? And then we had to get our act together. So leave that aside. Getting to this, I would recommend or think that if people can agree on a cluster, and we can probably come back to it at the end of the hour, again, if people agree on to work in a cluster, they are willing to commit some resources. There are people who have skills that can do things. And then we talk about, okay, here's this unit, and they need to have a certain direction. And that's a strategy owner who knows where we're going. And then they would look at each other and in the cluster and say, in English, you have this term, what is the sharpest tool in the shed? Which person is the sharpest one here? Is it Vasil? Is it Christian? Is it Tom? And hopefully we could agree on it, because if we work in a cluster, to some extent we have our egos at the door or at the entrance. We like you hang your hat out there in the entrance, so you check your egos, and now we look for the common good. I know that's hard for all of us, but so who's the sharp? We look at this role and we find this, who can do that, and maybe. And I think it normally works, and that was the same where I grew up in the Danish co-op system. There were some farmers who were definitely not suited to go into negotiations with labor unions. My dad happened to be one of those who were, and the others had enough confidence that they selected him to do that job. So that's. But of course, you have to, again, remember, you have to have the competence, you have to have the vision, and then you have the character. I mean, if you're a villain, a scoundrel, then don't let those people have mandate. And the same with which, and I think in a way it's probably easier to find the strategy owner, because that is business, that is customers, that everybody knows about that. The Scrum Master or the operations owner, we often have that problem that people say, well, that should not really be necessary. People can figure that out themselves. No, they can't, especially not in the beginning. And sometimes we tease people by saying, oh, have you ever seen an elite sports team without a coach? With a playing coach? Well, that's something that happens out in the countryside where they can barely put a soccer team, football team together. Then you have a playing coach. But normally, and that's what this person does, especially, again, in the complex domain. If you're over here in production, and then you can probably get away with one leadership role, but I think a lot of experience shows that you need two. But that's a bit harder to convince people. And maybe it's also harder to find people. But again, look for people who, I mean, I have had both roles. And to some extent, I can do both roles, but if I can choose, I want to be the Scrum Master or the operations owner, because what really sort of ticks for me, what makes me think that the sun is shining, is that I see people grow, and they can do more today than they could yesterday. And okay, I like to serve customers as well, but if I have to make a choice, that's probably my choice. So you have to look for people with that attitude. Christian.
Of course, it all depends on the circumstances, Kurt. So in some circumstances, I just this morning, I elected to be the Scrum Master in a group of people that need to work together to get something done. And but normally I would like to be the strategic owner. But in this context, it was obvious that I was sort of best suited for this, and there was another guy with lots of experience in this area, and he said he could be the leader, strategic leader. So no problem. What we do is not we try to serve, right, and find out in which position can I serve. That's right. That's sort of the thing.
Good. All right.
Okay, may I ask you a question? Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So just to align these roles, I guess it will also help for cluster managers and so on to understand. So actually, this strategy owner is actually a cluster manager or cluster coordinator. So a person with a vision. Where are we going and why are we going there? So it's okay. It's okay. Actually, so in some clusters, it means like the head of the governance board or whatever. So it depends on the organizational structure, but mainly it's a cluster coordinator. So it's okay, and this role is understandable. But if we speak about this operations owner, so if we try to apply this methodology to a cluster, so I'm for instance, I'm a cluster manager or coordinator. Okay, I understand. I'm a strategy owner. We need to have a strategy, and it's okay when all our cluster understand. So it's like a quality criteria for management to have a strategy. We even are trying to make some accreditation. So if you don't have a strategy, you can't call yourself a cluster. You're like a cluster initiative or a community or whatever, but you're not a cluster. But if I'm a cluster manager coordinator, I understand this strategy owner, but I need to understand this operations owner. So is it also me? Do I have to wear two hats, or I need to find it inside my team?
I mean, ideally, going back to sort of vanilla Scrum, that was a separate role. I mean, he was not a team member, and he was not you as a strategy owner or a product owner. I think because what this person focuses on is how people work together, make sure that they have, and that's again because we have complexity. Do we have the same understanding of the situation? There will be misunderstandings. There will be unforeseen problems, and this is the guy who removes the stones on the road, or the landmines in the field, or whatever, so that people can go out and do their business. And this is the one who understands how people work together and how they react in these situations. So this is a people person, and I would say there are, of course, some extremely talented people, and maybe you're one of them, who can handle both of these roles. But the thing is, the difficulty is that if you have that, if you try to balance those two roles, everybody else is more or less almost forced to think of you as the traditional boss. I understand. And here we have two people, and we have what in the American constitutions that Mr. Trump is about to dismount now, we have checks and balances. There are different forces that balance each other, so no one sort of runs away with it all. So that's what we're happening here. Also, there is you who have the strategy vision. You know we need to go in that direction. And that is also hard work, and you don't have the bandwidth also to look 100% after how do people get along, and are there any problems, and it came out really. One of the ideas came from the American Navy during the Second World War. There was a fight in the Pacific Ocean between Japan and the US, of course, and it was a fight on aircraft carriers. And it was definitely in the complex domain because there was no experience. We didn't have aircraft carriers in the First World War. So they didn't know, and the captain was up there, and he was trying to take charge of the battle and command and move and do all things, and should we launch this plane or that plane, or should he carry bombs or torpedoes? And so he had no mental bandwidth to look after the ship. So he got his XO, or his second in command, it turned out to be, but he has the responsibility for the ship. And he made sure that petrol was pumped, and planes were moved, and people were given food, and the floors were cleaned, and the laundry was done, and whatever needs to do. So he was looking into, so we talk about how the strategy owner looks out to the world we are serving or trying to accomplish things in, and the operations owner looks into the way we work. Make sense?
Yeah. Thank you, Kurt. I was just trying to make sure that everyone who is watching this video and everyone from cluster understand how to manage their everyday activities with these new methodologies and approaches, because sometimes they can be a bit frustrated. So that was the main purpose of my question. I see that Alexander has a raised hand, so please.
Yeah, maybe just a reflection to the discussion, because in reality, let's say our issue in everyday operations are really connected to what Vasil said about split of role in a working group. And typically in this working group, we try to find some leaders which work either on some, let's say, strategy or some, let's say, project preparing. And then when, for example, we submit some project, we want some, we win some, I don't know, applications, project applications, or a new grant, or it can be, well, just a customer-based project. But there is a situation with project team, and we go to the, let's say, classical project management approach with split of role, in project team. So my question is rather, of course, we should maybe better learn this split of role and profile with Scrum Master, with product owner, operation strategy owner, so on. But maybe just to put the question, as far as understood, many roles can be dynamic, right? Depending on situation and depending on even in the same project team, we can see some roles in dynamic changing, depending on, I don't know, situation, on goals, on.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, and the more, I mean, the further down you are towards chaos and things fluctuating wildly, then you perhaps need to change roles, and you can also think of a cluster or a team operating in a bit the same way as the special forces in the army are doing. I mean, they are a small bunch, and we've had some of those both in Denmark and Norway. They're the paratroopers here, and that's what they do. I mean, they are multi-skilled professionals, and they can move and take up different positions. Of course, there's one of us that's the best one with the rifle, but so maybe that's me, but Christian can also do it if I happen to be disabled or doing something else. And so we move and position dynamically. And that's why we need to have a small team, because it's only in a small team that you can do that without overhead. Because up to about 7 ± 2 people, we can sort of know where the others are without having to think too much. We realize it intuitively, and we move to create space for the others, etc. So
and we focus on the team's goal, the collective goal.
Yeah,
and try to do each our best, but for the collective goal.
Yeah, realizing that each of them are individual operators, players, if you will, and they are individual, and they should have space, and they should have mandate, but we balance the individualistic need with the need for the corporate or the collective. That has to be a balance. It can't be either or. Then it goes. Then we don't manage our. All right.
I see. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's. Time is ticking. I want to take the last questions here, if I may. Is that okay? Let's see what happens here. Am I?
Can you bring up the slide again?
It's just Zoom that confuses me again. Okay, are we cool? Yep, we are. So there were some of the things you wrote, Vasset, about finding the leadership rules, but that's actually just what we've been discussing. Agree on values, mandate, responsibilities. We'll get to that a bit more. And involve through volunteering. You need people's engagement, and since you can't pay them to do it, as we talked about, Vasil, you have to make sure that they actually want to. Otherwise, they go home, and then no work gets done. And then you have some commitments of the companies that join into this, into a cluster. They have to give some commitment about their willingness to submit time and maybe compensation. And again, I know that's they're volunteers, but some of the roles would probably, I mean, again, going back to my memory of the co-op days, okay, those people who were given the mandate or elected to serve on some committee, they were also given a compensation, because of course they couldn't work their own farm while they were doing the common work. So to some extent, I think it's fair that the clusters actually do pay the people who put in a lot of hours in it, one way or another. Whether that is technical, team member, or operational, or strategical. So, and then there's just very quickly some things here about common challenges that we've seen elsewhere. So, of course, when you want something like this, and remember, these are individual businesses, they each have their own balance sheet to fulfill and their own strategy. That's all right. That should be like that. But when we enter together, we have to make sure that there's a spirit of benevolence, that we believe that the others actually want something good for me. Otherwise, they're not going to share. Because they did. I learned another expression in the US: when you don't have trust with people, you say, "Stay in front of me and keep your hands where I can see them." Coming out of the old Wild West, I want to see if you go for your gun, right? So stay in front of me and keep your hands where I can see. Okay, that doesn't give you much trust, does it? So we have to establish that. We have to have that compensation and contribution, as we talked about. And sometimes it's a problem. People would like to have and not give. Then you allocate time to common activities, and you stick to it. So, I mean, I've seen that several times. People want to work together and okay, yeah, we'll this person can work one day a week on this project or something. And then next week, oh, now we have a new order. No, he doesn't come because now he has to work on this. And then it breaks. You break the confidence. You honor your commitments. So you have to have some sort of, and that's what by the way, the operations owner should also, if that's about to happen, and all of a sudden Christian is pulling a guy back because now he can make money locally, then Vasil, the Scrum Master, will go to him and say, that's not what we agreed. Now stick to your promises. I'll have you ask on the line here. It's okay we say that the Scrum Master or the operations owner, he speaks softly, but he carries a big stick.
And in a way helps people to say no.
Yeah. Then going just further, there's something that I've also quite often experienced locally here. It may not be clusters, but there have been networks of companies. And then all of a sudden, everybody gets in a huge fight over who actually owns what was created. So that has to be in the charter in the beginning, especially if you develop products together or you develop markets. Then all of a sudden someone, no, that's my market. I spoke to this guy first or something. So who owns this? And then another tendency is that we, especially those who work a lot with it, we tend to make overly complex agreements or overly many constraints. And then we kill it. And then we should have, and that's why you remember perhaps from last time, we have this concept of the transient circle. That is, if a crisis, something we didn't think of, we didn't think that would happen, but there's a crisis and we need to deal with it. We need to stabilize the unstable situation. That should be an agreed principle of how we do it, because otherwise these networks die on the first crisis. So that should be handled up front, I think. I propose to you. Is that all right?
Yeah. That's cool.
So let me, and this was again, your questions from yesterday, Vasil, were kind of inspiring. So I thought I would rework one of the slides we have on actually how to introduce Agile Lean Leadership and try and see, and this is only a first shot. So again, what the Americans would call a hip shot. You shoot from the hip without taking too much aim. So this is a very quick one, but here is sort of my idea of my first idea, I would say. It needs to be reviewed. Everything needs to be reviewed and improved. But here's how we could say the Ukrainian Cluster Alliance. I'm just thinking out loud now from your drawings. And so first of all, you have some informal conversations among whoever, Vasil, Alex, others. What are our values and our objectives? Try and be clear on them. Maybe work on that template we did last time. So once we have informal conversation, and that creates trust as well, that we get to know each other. Oh, these are human beings, I can talk to them. Then we become more concrete, and we develop a picture of the state. What is the real state and what are the real objectives? And we could do that future backwards exercise we talked about. That's always a good one to create an illustration of. And then we try to describe the model. Now, this is what we've been debating now, sort of loosely, backwards and forwards. What is a strategy owner? What is it? We try to make pictures, presentation, description, a manifest, and something that can be read. And people say, oh, so that's what it is. And we can do that centrally. And then we educate, and I've now called them guardians instead of saying that they are Scrum Masters or operational. But who are the people who can go out and train? So let's educate a bunch of people centrally so that they can go out and do this decentrally. Okay, as soon as we have at least one of them, we can actually move to the local arena now and take one of the areas where now we do this locally. So we've done this centrally within your organization, within whoever. To some degree, we do have a common agreement. It's not a perfect one, but it's okay for now, and then we will refine it as we move. So we do the same. We have informal conversations out locally in Odessa or wherever this cluster is, finding common values, objectives, and resources. One of the things that's very important when it's the real people, that they now share their values, they share what they want, and also what they've got. What can we bring to the table? So this is a principle that I can talk more about, actually learned from an American professor who had something called strategic doing, of helping impoverished societies. He's mostly done it in South America. But the most important thing, he says, is when people get together for the first time, they talk about what they can do, what they have, instead of what they don't have, and instead of focusing on the differences. Basil, I don't really like people with beards or something like that. That's just not the first remark. Well, we should look at what we have in common. Because then as we move closer, then we can handle the difficulties that perhaps do exist in the real world. Then we do the same now locally in Odessa. Just take that as an example. We now do this together with those who are interested. Maybe it's also a corner of Odessa, people working on export companies, who knows. We do the future backwards, and we do that canvas. For example, these are good tools, but could be others. The main objective is to have a clear picture. And then we start initiatives. We get a structure. We get this is how we will work. We look at those initiatives, those projects we want to do, the 4 and 5 W's, the why, the who, the what, the when, and maybe the where. And we can work on that together. And I just pulled up a picture here this is actually from a training course where, and Tom Gilb would call this an impact table or an impact matrix, an impact estimation. So we focus on, why are we doing this? What is it we want to achieve? There's some good stuff, the blue one. There's some bad stuff we want to dampen, the red one. And the stakeholders, who do we need to talk to? Who do we need to ask? Or are there government regulations we need to make sure we fulfill? And then we start talking about what can we do, the strategies that we actually, the things we have the possibility of doing. And then we start mapping out how much we think this will contribute to these things and whether that'll have an influence on these people. Oh, that's a long talk, but that's, again, it's a very important visualization for people so that when they discuss and meet, they have common ground. And they don't need to go back to scratch every time and say, well, what's really the situation right now? Well, the situation is here. And next week we meet, we may change it because we discovered another stakeholder or something else. So going back to this one here.
So just a question for the previous slide. So why it's about value or it's about the goal?
Value and goal. I mean, the things we want to have.
Mm-hmm.
We want to have 20% more export of this and this and that, or we have a problem. The red ones here are negatives. We want to remove tariff barriers to Turkey.
Yeah. Okay.
Or something. And how can we do that? And then you can start about the strategies. How can you accomplish it? And the percentage numbers is, we believe that this strategy here will contribute 75% to that objective, 10 to that, 80. And so some of them may be over-implemented if we do all, but again, what this gives is it gives a basis for prioritization. And so maybe I would say we don't need to do this strategy because it's enough what we have here. or maybe we don't need that one, or because we don't have the money and the time to do everything. So that gives you a basis for common prioritization. That is for the strategy owner to come up with, I think we should do this and this and that. That will give us maximum return on investment. This is something we use in our product owner courses, people who are product oriented, but it also works at a higher level at the cluster, for example. So, okay, so once you have established initiatives, okay, we want to do this. This is the thing we want. We now have such a picture on the wall of what we want to accomplish, and this is the most important thing we think we can do. And then we have to find and educate the people who can actually participate. And we have to volunteer them, and we have to figure out whether they are should be OOs or SOs, or they should be team members, and we have to teach them some things, I guess, and we have to certify that they actually have the qualifications. And we saw that before on the spreadsheets, that can certainly be used. And then we establish the structures. What will the circles actually be? And up here, the initiatives were more about what we want to achieve. What we didn't think so much about the structures and the practical details. Now we think about that. And it's much easier to think about the structure once you know what you're doing. Again, if you have a practical challenge, there's a sense of urgency to get things. So what are the structures? The circles, and we can talk about another rainy day, how the circles should be put together, and how do we then delegate upwards on when we have to decide at a regional level, or maybe national. And who, like we were thinking about locally, who's the sharpest tool in the shed? We also think about it now. Okay, so now here from Odessa, if we were going to meet with all the others in the region, who would represent us the best way? And I think both we here in the Nordic countries have some memories or some background in the Nordic things, as we talked about, and you probably have both from the Kiev and Rus and the Cossack period, where free men wanted, and sometimes too free. I mean, they were too free. They wanted, but then again, there is something to build on there. So that's the structure. And now, okay, we pull the big switch and we start working. And then as we start working, we go into iterations. We plan next iteration. What are we going to do next week, next 2 weeks, next month, whatever the iteration is? Then we do it the best we can. Then we study, review, and retrospective. Review looks out to those we serve, product. Retrospective looks in our process. And then we act and decide and change. And we keep doing as long as we. So so that was sort of a proposed one from my side here.
Mm-hmm. Actually, yeah. Thank you, Kurt, for sharing this roadmap, because actually it could work because we were already thinking about some steps. For instance, like finding the common values and having these informal conversations, and actually this our conversation is part of our idea. So we want to have some cluster talks and so on. So give some kind of I don't know, a club or whatever for people to talk about values and so on, to understand what do they have in common, not just like the word in their naming, a cluster, because it's not in common, it's just a very basic, but also to find some other stuff. And actually, inside the UCA, we have a couple of levels. It's a multi-layered structure. Of course, we have a UCA as an organization, as an association of clusters. But also we have these circles, like different combinations of clusters. For instance, it can be a working group for smart cities, for energy, for dual-use technology, for medical industry, and so on. But also these circles are made of clusters from different regions. And this is a third level, a cluster with their members, with real businesses and universities and so on. And we have this multi-layer structure. And actually what we do have right now, so it's not called the same way as you have in your methodology, but every, for instance, circle has some kind of a manifesto. We call it a bit different, but we have a common agreement on why are we working together, why are we connected, basic stuff about this commitment on sharing resources and so on. We do have this. And we also have some basic strategies. So we do start like the initial process for every this circle is for instance like mapping resources and mapping the challenges. So what are we going to achieve? What challenges we want to address and what goals and what resources do we have? And then we try to find the match between these challenges and these resources because we can't cover everything. We need to prioritize. And based on this stuff, we have some smaller circles inside this big circle, some working groups, so people can work on every separate project or challenge and so on. So because very often if we speak, for instance, a medical industry, some clusters might be interested in one topic, some clusters might be interested in another topic. All these topics are connected to medical industry, but they can be med tech or whatever. So they connect and work on these projects. And in this way, they can implement this project and also to attract funding and resources. It is also really important for them. So it works really similar actually. And Alexander mentioned a very important problem. So that's why we're maybe digging in so much details about this role differentiations, because actually what sometimes doesn't work. So maybe we can discuss it as a part of other discussion, but how to differentiate roles, because more or less we understand this, like what value this circle needs to deliver, what are the customers and so on, but what we really had, so how to differentiate roles, for instance. Yes, so who is the strategy owner and so on, because frankly speaking, in most of these working groups, the strategy owner is Alexander, and it's a bit hard because he cannot manage everything, you know. So it's impossible. He doesn't have enough resource. So you know, it's even in terms of management. Yes, 7 ± 2. It doesn't work at all. But we need to delegate and to grow these initial leaders, and that's why I was asking about it. So like in every these circles, we need to have like a strategy owner and an operations owner. Yes, like these two, and then we have a team. So we need to differentiate, but this more practical stuff based on the industry and the expertise. Okay, so this is like the main approach. Yes, like the outline that you suggest.
Yeah. And again, I'll stop the screen share here now, because that's, it was just a quick rendition, and again open to discussion, and of course you're welcome to use some of it, or you say no, what is this guy smoking? That doesn't work. But that was about what I had prepared for today, and I guess we had did we say an hour? Yeah. And there's still time for some questions or discussions, but
yes,
I haven't prepared anything else apart from
that's okay. It's an open discussion, so it's really great that we can talk.
I would certainly
I like this last roadmap, so it's really quite applicable to many our situation, and maybe Vasil to the project. We start with region because it looks like the national level, regional level, so it's really good approach. So thank you, Kurt.
There's one thing I would like to point out. I think it's great that you centrally develop the top line. This is what we want. There is a framework, because otherwise it is just too open to go and talk to people. They don't know what you're talking about if you don't have something. But then go to the local level and let them build the regional level. Let them choose who goes to the region instead of pushing it down. Because we have to build from the bottom of people who actually want to do this. Like we said before, since you're not able to pay them to do this work, then they will have to do it because they choose to do it. And so we have to work with intrinsic motivation. And intrinsic motivation, according to our friends at Oslo BI, similar to CNEO, is that you have to have autonomy. Okay, I'm an independent person. I can actually decide things. Mastery. I have a position here where I can grow to be better. I have good relationship, and I have a value. There is a goal that resonates that I think is important. And those four, typically, you can think of intrinsic insight and motivation in terms of those four categories. Again, both my model and the four categories of intrinsic motivation, like I can't remember who said it, all models are wrong, but some are useful.
Yeah.
It helps you think, and that's also what I would say. Basil, you describe it, you do this, you do that. I think what is really good is if you can decide on a common terminology and stick to it, although it may not be perfect. And what the good news about some of this is, of course, that since this is already being translated into Ukrainian, there's a lot of things you can piggyback on that is already there. You don't have to develop it from scratch. Vlada, that you met last time, she's, as you say in English, she's beavering away like a little beaver on biting in the wood, in the trees. So she's now 65% done. So she's probably finished at the end of March, as you said. So now, and that material can be used. So it is there, and it is in Ukrainian, which I absolutely think it have to be for the local businesses.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, thank you so much for your work and actually for sharing all these ideas, because we really are finding these new structures, because we are, let me say, too agile, because right now, because it's cluster movement, and sometimes you need some kind of a structure in order, because it's, it's too flat. You need like to consolidate everything, and that's why we're working on these models, and we understand that there are not so many models in management that actually work for us, especially if we take into consideration war, the lack of resources, and so on and so on. So most of them sound great in theory, but if you try to implement it inside the UCA, it doesn't work actually. You cannot, because Alexander knows some people like from corporate environment are coming to UCA and telling, so let's do this hierarchy, let's do like in corporation. You understand? So it won't work here because people are in a bit different. So this is cool. Actually, we raised a very important object, entity like value, and it's also of course it's maybe for some other discussions, but it's really important because inside our community, a lot of people don't understand this like value, even cluster managers. So I'm like connecting some business players and so on. So what value we can produce, and it's really important because it's not very obvious, because as you may know, in every country they are trying to find a perfect recipe for their clusters. So there is not like cluster is this and it works in every country, because in Catalonia they're doing it for one purpose, in France they're doing for another purpose, in Norway they're doing for the third purpose. And this like understanding of a value, how clusters can be valuable, because for instance we're starting these programs with the Ukrainian Ministry of Economy, and they're telling, so we want support clusters just because they're clusters. What value they can produce for regional economies and for national economy, we need to understand. And this is great. This is also how we think, because we understand that in Europe there are a lot of problems with clusters because they were supported by government, and they're a bit lazy because I get the support, so I don't need. So it's not like in the real living market,
If I may say, we actually had an office in one of sort of an innovation center, and there was a lot of public money floating around. But I can tell you there wasn't much result produced, because after a little while it becomes more important to get the grants from the government than it got to be to actually produce something that customers would buy. And that happens very, very quickly. As soon as there's money on the table, you move from intrinsic motivation to extrinsic. And money on the table beats everything in many ways. So so that's why, yeah, terribly important. And so there's a whole discipline there that I can talk about, and Tom can talk about, and Christian can talk about as well, on value, about how to get people to understand value, to put numbers on it so that they say this value is actually twice as important as that one, or maybe not. I mean, do we agree or do we not agree? And then we can get to a point of prioritizing and spending our resources wisely, instead of just being driven by as a sort of a quick emotion that I like this or I don't like that. So that, and I think again, one of the things, but that's for another discussion, of course, but we would really like to see if we can get started by educating this core of trainers and guardians and whatever that could help you locally. That would be, for me, that would probably look like the first step that we can do. But of course, we would be happy to participate in discussions to clarify this and refine this that we talked about today. Let us know what we can do.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience and your time and energy with us. This is really important for us, and the hope that our cases are also useful for you and maybe for your researchers. Yes, so maybe it will also inspire you. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for all the participants. Actually, we hope that we can collaborate in the future in some way. Let us digest all this information and think about some other forms of our collaboration. Maybe you will also come up with some ideas. So let's stay in touch. But first of all, thank you so much for these two great webinars. I hope it was useful and interesting for all our community.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
See you soon.
Thanks a lot. Really, we much appreciate, because what you presented, and also Tom today sent several links. So really very helpful. We really appreciate. And of course, we hope for the next, let's say, collaboration. We try to find maybe some project, because today there is a lot of, noises, plans, around Ukraine. Everything is very turbulent, but yeah, we have many partners, many friends, and I hope, yeah, we'll continue this approach to and of course, yeah, hope on your help in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye then.
Thank you.
Bye.
So have a nice day and bye.
Yeah, bye then.
Bye.